So welcome here. Thank you for joining us for another inner hour tonight. Welcome here. Excuse me. Unless I forget to say it later, I hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving holiday and get to spend it doing something you love or with someone you love. Just take a moment if you haven't done so yet and let go of the stresses of the day and the week and bring your attention present so that we can just rest together for the next hour in that spirit that dwells within and among us. Alrighty then. So I'm going to, as usual, do some readings tonight and some of my my take on them. This first one is from one of those daily devotional books. You've probably seen them, like a reading per day for the year. This one happens to be called Sacred Intentions. Just in case anybody's interested, you can probably see that. So, excuse me 1 second while I take a drink. Alrighty, so this is this is written by Rabbi Ira Stone. It says, God's presence in humanity is not limited to one person, but resides in each person and awaits acknowledgement by that person. The failure of one person to acknowledge God's presence at any one moment means that God's presence for the entire world is diminished by exactly that amount of disbelief. Doubt is inevitable, and no one can avoid such moments. But this is the task for each of us. The Torah prescribes a way that allows each of the people in Israel to make God's presence palpable. Study and prayer are two parts of this three-part way. The third part consists of deeds of loving kindness. When we recognize God's presence in the lives and faces of other human beings, we bring that present. We respond to that presence by trying to nurture it in the lives of others. To feed the hungry, to clothe the naked, to heal the sick, to comfort the bereaved, is to emulate God's relationship with humanity and to extend the reach of God's love and therefore the presence of God. And at the same time, by helping to free others from the oppression of their afflictions, we also help them to more successfully maintain God's presence in their lives. As we demonstrate the way of God, which is a way of peace and a way of wholeness, that has consequences in our lives, one of which is that our doubt begins to dissipate. So that was our daily reading actually for yesterday or this morning. I've already forgotten. We do, Ani and I do 30 to 45 minutes almost every morning of devotional practices, part of which is a sacred reading, part of which is prayer, different things we do. And I liked that one, and it tied into my theme for tonight, so I thought I would share that with you. The theme tonight actually is just all taken from the Bible, and except for this reading I just did, and it's on love. And love is a big theme, so we could have endless programs on different aspects of that, from different scriptures, different of our own life experiences, different understandings of it, different impacts of it, and so on. So I want to just have a kind of a random assortment tonight of some things that the Bible says prominently about love, some of which you'll be very familiar with, some maybe not so much. This first one's actually from Genesis, which is the first book. This is from the 29th chapter, and it's about Jacob and Rachel. And it says that Jacob served 7 years for Rachel. If you don't know that story, go back and read it. But essentially, to be granted by her father, to be granted Rachel's hand in marriage, Jacob had to serve her father for 7 years. There's a lot more to that story, but that's kind of the background for this part. So Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, meaning so that he could marry her and be with her. And those years seemed to him like only a few days because of his love for her. So I thought that was an interesting thing that hopefully you've experienced, that when you really love some other soul, the amount of time you spend in relationship with them, even if it's time spent working, if you will, making effort, being of service, taking care of them, it's a different perception of the passage of that time than doing those very same things without love or for someone you don't care for. I remember, I've told this story, but I remember years ago when we had our previous dog to the one we have now, we were very busy in our lives at that time. We had children, we had young grandchildren who were very active in our almost everyday life. We had many neighborhood children who were active in our home because of our grandchildren's presence in our home. I had a very active teaching ministry then, which I still do, even though I thought I was retiring, but I'm not. Anyway, we had a very busy life, and my wife was teaching in public school full-time then too. Busy, 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 and we got this puppy. And if you had told me this puppy is going to require at least 2 hours, sometimes 3 or 4 hours of your time every day, I would have laughed, saying, I don't have 2 to 3 hours or more of unobligated time during my day. I don't have it. There's no way that can happen. And then we got the dog, who I fell in love with, and I did that, and Ani did as well. But we spent hours and hours with puppy training, with dog training, with being with him, with playing, with doing walks, with vet care, with food, just all the stuff that comes along with that. And it was fine. And we made time for it. We found time for it. And it wasn't one of those things either of us were grumbling or griping about because we loved him so much. That's one of the things that we often don't notice or maybe admit to ourselves. We kind of are good at self-deception in big and little ways. One of the littler ways, which can still be consequential, is that we often tell ourselves if only we had more time, we'd do more things. We'd meditate more. We'd attend spiritual functions and classes and programs more. We'd help our neighbors more. We'd, have more time to study. We'd enjoy ourselves more. We'd relax. I don't know what, whatever you tell yourself. But if I only had more time, these are the things that I would do, that I would love to do. I would go on vacation. I would learn a hobby. I would learn how to speak whatever language you want. I'd learn how to play an instrument. Whatever it is you want to do that you're not doing because you can't. You don't have time. So there's no way you can do it. But the reality is, not 100%. There are definitely circumstances beyond our human control. But the reality is, for the most part, we make time in our lives for what we love. And we don't for what we don't. So some of those stories we tell ourselves about, I would love to have more time to meditate. I would love to have more time to do this. I would love to have more time to spend with you. I would love to have more time to learn an instrument. If you really, really wanted to do that, for the most part, you would be doing that. I know there are exceptions, but we fool ourselves sometimes and get caught in our little comfort zones and use our financial, health, time constraints as excuses to tell ourselves that this is why I can't do what I really love. You can do what you really love. So, a couple more. This is from Exodus. This is the Lord speaking to the people through Moses, Exodus 26. I show favor to thousands, to those who love me. So, that's an interesting idea. And it sounds like something we shouldn't say about God, or that God should not tell us that he gives favors to people who love him, because it kind of implies that has favoritism. And there are other places in the Bible that said God doesn't show favorites and, that sort of thing. But we're made in God's image and likeness, right? We're made of that same stuff. Do you show more favoritism with your time and resources and attention to people who really love you, than people who don't? Probably, if you're honest, the answer is yes, of course you do. That's the way of things. I definitely spend much more time, hopefully, doing that with my wife and my family and my close friends than I do with people I don't know well. That doesn't mean I treat people I don't know well badly, or won't pay attention to them when they come before me. Hopefully I do that successfully. I do give them my attention and all that. But we certainly, if I really needed a favor, for example, the first person I'm going to call is not some stranger or not somebody I met once at a program somewhere. I'm going to call a friend. Say, hey, could you help me out with this? And because they're my friend, they're more inclined to do it. So I think that's kind of an aspect, a reality of life. Okay, so this is an often quoted one. It's from Leviticus 19:18. Many people who are Christians believe that Jesus invented this. He was actually quoting it. You'll recognize just the last part of it. Probably not the whole part, because the whole part's rarely quoted. You shall not take vengeance or hold any grudges against any of your people, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself, for I am the Lord your God. We usually hear just the part about love your neighbor, not the part about not holding grudges, and that you're to love your neighbor as yourself because I am God. It's an interesting conditional phrase there. So there's a teaching there also that would be worth contemplating. Why is that? Why isn't it just and you should love your neighbor as yourself? Why is there a conditional clause there? Because I am the Lord. One to contemplate. And then, of course, another famous one that, again, many Christians think Jesus created because they hear it in the New Testament, but he was quoting Deuteronomy 6:5, which is a teaching of Moses that he received from the divine. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. One of the primary teachings of Judaism, and in Christianity in the New Testament, in both Gospels of Mark and Matthew, when Jesus was asked, what is the most important of all the teachings? This is what he quotes. Okay. And then another one less quoted is Joshua 22:5. And it says, you shall love the Lord your God. Well, that part we hear a lot. You shall love the Lord your God, and you shall cling to him and serve him with all your heart and soul. Now, we're not just talking about loving God. We're talking about serving God with all your heart and soul. Not serving God reluctantly, not serving God with resistance, not serving God with bitterness and resentment and frustration. Serving God with all your heart and soul, which implies a willingness to do that. And the other part of this is that the cling to him is something we don't have a lot of teachings about in In Christianity, because most of us don't read Hebrew and we don't study the Jewish Bible. In this section, elsewhere as well, but in this section where I just read cling to him, the word in Hebrew is devakut, and devakut means like glued, like stuck together, like really adhered to one another. So it's something that it's talking about always basically being really, really, really connected and focused and intimately, closely bound up with this divine spirit, with God. We have a lot of names we try to call the divine, and none of them really work because the divine being divine is too big to be named, too big to be contained in a conceptual box. But we have to try to talk about it, so we use words. So feel free to substitute any words ever that I use that don't work for you. We're talking about something we can't really talk about, but we do experience, and it's critical that we understand it and be able to share it. So we have to use language which has limits. But the idea of really being awake to the intimacy of our connection to the divine all the time, and willing to be of service to it, willing to be open to it. And now I'm going to share a couple with you that you may not like so much, just a forewarning. So most people, including me, prefer to read the parts of the Bible that make them feel warm and cozy and not the parts that challenge them or are difficult to understand or make them go, I don't like that idea. And most people only teach about the parts that they really like as well. Teaching about difficult parts, confusing parts, for one, what does that mean? Or parts we don't think of as like, well, God wouldn't say that. Why is that in there? Those kind of parts are sometimes rough for us. And having avoided them for many, many years and finally being willing to work with some of them, I can tell you that there is a real value in being able to look at what's difficult to look at. There's something in there. It may not even be what it seems at first on the surface. It might be, but it may be that there's something there that isn't apparent to you until you're actually willing to look at it and say, okay, so what does this mean, and what can I get out of this? So here's a couple of those parts. The Lord tests, this is Psalm 11:5. So this is David writing. The Lord tests both the righteous and the wicked, and the Lord hates the one who loves violence. So now we have a statement where God hates somebody. And that's not the only place that occurs. That occurs repeatedly in a number of places. So that's kind of not the way we think of things. And you don't have to accept it just because I said it or just because it's in the Bible. But it's there. The Lord tests both the righteous and the wicked and hates the one who loves violence. I'll come back to that in a moment. Another one that's really difficult for many people is, this is again Psalms 97:10. Those of you who love the Lord must hate evil. So there we are again. Now, not only does God hate evil and those who love violence, which is often kind of a synonym for evil in the Bible. But if you love the Lord, you have to hate evil. Not love it, but hate it. That's okay. That doesn't fit with most of, how we feel and maybe what we're being taught in our various teachings now. So I'll come back to that. I just want to give you a couple more. These you'll like better. Jesus in the New Testament, Matthew 5:44. You have been taught that you should love your neighbor and hate your enemy. By the way, that phrase, this is just a little historical aside, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. Jesus said you have been taught that. Love your neighbor and hate your enemy does not appear, even one time, anywhere in the entire Torah, in any of the writings of the prophets, in any of the wisdom writings. It is not in the Bible, period. It's not there. And yet Jesus says, you've been taught this, to a group of Jews in first century who, had they not been taught that, had that not been written somewhere, would have been going, what are you talking about? We've never heard that. What do you mean we've been taught that? But none of them say that because they had been taught that. So scholars for years and years and years struggled with that, both Jewish and Christian scholars, just academic scholars even. Why does he say that? And why does nobody challenge it? Because it's not there. It's not there. So then, when they found the Dead Sea Scrolls in the late 40s and began to translate them in the 50s, and still are translating them, they found an Essene writing called the Manual of Discipline, and 1 QS4, which is how it's labeled. At the beginning of one of those documents for their community, a community rule, was you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. Jesus was quoting an Essene document that we didn't even know existed until almost the early 50s. And they knew well, because it was a very prevalent sect in first century Judaism, and their teachings and writings were very well known, as were their communities. They had a large community at Mount Tabor, a large community at Qumran. So he was quoting something well known then that thousands of years later we didn't even know existed, and now we do know exists. So anyway, he's saying, you've been taught that, but I say to you, love your enemies. So now we're to love our enemies and pray for those who persecute you. So some people believe that that is now a contrary teaching to God hates those who do violence and those who love God should hate evil. That sounds like a contradiction to that. But Jesus does not say, nor can you find a place where he says, that you are to love evil. That's not ever said. People, yes. People who oppose you, people who persecute you, people who hurt you, your enemies, yes. And pray for them. Absolutely, he taught that. Okay, I'm going to go back for just a moment to the two difficult ones, and we'll end with ones you'll feel more comfortable with, probably. So the idea of, we now have an idea that this is a challenging one. So just forgive me if you need to, but there's this concept that doing violence is evil, and that we should abhor violence and abhor evil. And obviously, there's definitely a truth to that. Would it be better? Would we like to have a world without those things? I mean, yeah. And does the Bible forbid the use of violence ever, always, under every circumstance? No, not even close. The commandment that Christians often quote of thou shalt not kill does not say that. That's not the commandment. There's a very specific Hebrew word there. It does not say thou shalt not kill. It says thou shalt not commit murder. So if I go out because I'm angry at somebody and intentionally take their life, that's murder. Even in our society today, by law, that's murder. If I am doing something and someone is trying to kill a child, and I prevent them from killing that child, and in the process of preventing them, I end up killing the perpetrator, that is not murder. Is it violence? Yeah, absolutely it is. Is it murder? No, it absolutely is not. Not biblically, not spiritually, not legally. It's not. So there are aspects that are very difficult to look at and consider. And there are times where different, especially in the Jewish Bible, there are times where they are sent to do battle with different people. And it's difficult. But the idea of the need for violence to protect the innocent is a biblical idea. Whether we like that now or not, whether maybe you personally do accept that, maybe you don't, maybe you struggle with it, maybe you don't know. But biblically, it's absolutely in there that there are many, many examples. I'm not going to get into all that and get sidetracked with it tonight, but there are many examples of that there are times where that's necessary to stop an evil and protect an innocent, and that we have actually biblically, not talking politically or any other way, but biblically, we have an obligation to do that and protect the innocent. So you notice that the text does not say God hates all those who ever do violence. It says God hates those who love violence. That's very different than being willing to use something extreme to protect an innocent. Because in those cases, it's not something the protector would be loving or delighting in or taking joy in. It would be very difficult, but they would be willing to do that difficult thing to protect their family or innocents or children or whatever the case may be. So that may be an obvious one and not hard for you at all, but for some people, that's a really tough thing to come to terms with in ourselves. And it was back then too, way back in the days of Moses in like 1300 BC and in the time of Jesus 2,000 years ago. And still, it's tough to grapple with all that. There's a lot of things about life in a dualistic physical world that are tough to come to terms with. So, but we all have to figure out ways, where are we going to stand on those things? How are we going to look at that? Okay, so the last two. This is Jesus again in the New Testament. This is John 13:34. I'm giving you a new commandment, that you love one another, just as I have loved you. So again, we often hear you're to love one another. That's the so-called new commandment. And obviously it's not new. But again, the conditional clause is usually left off of that, a conditional phrase. To love one another as I have loved you. So it's not, in a way, open-ended of we can decide love means whatever we want and say, okay, well, I'm loving you if I do this. We have this very clear model of the way Jesus lived and interacted with people. And that's the model he's holding up, is saying, this is the model. When I'm talking about loving one another, I mean like this. I mean like I taught you, like I healed you, like I comforted you, like I helped take care of you, like I befriended you, like I was there for you, like I was on your side. Like that. That's what I want you to do. That's what I mean by loving one another. Like what you have seen me do with you. The kind of relationship I have with you, that's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm saying. This is what I want you to do. So there's a model for it. We're not left kind of wondering, what does it mean to love each other? What does that look like? It was pretty, what he meant by it was he demonstrated. So, and the last one is actually also from the New Testament, but it's from Paul. It's from 1 Corinthians 13, one of the more frequently quoted Christian passages. And it's about the importance and power of love. You will have, most of you who've gone to churches will have heard this many times probably. If I speak with the tongues of angels, but do not have love, I am like a noisy gong or clanging cymbal. If I have been given the gift of prophecy and know all the secret mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have faith so strong that I can move mountains, but I do not have love, I am nothing. If I give away all my possessions to the charity and to the poor, if I surrender my body, but I do not have love, it does me no good. So some of these things were very highly valued back then. The being able to speak, they believed it was possible to speak in a heavenly tongue, the language of angels. They often called it the language of heaven. To be able to commune with higher beings, higher intelligences. That was very highly valued. Paul is saying, even if you can do that, but you don't have love in your heart, it's worthless. Um, Having the gift of prophecy was a big thing, particularly in the Jewish tradition, particularly in that era. Um, there have been different messianic eras in Jewish history. The time of Christ was one of those. There were, many Christians don't know, but besides Jesus, there were many, many other people claiming to be Messiah in his lifetime and the generation right after him also. Um, Many, many of whom raised up hundreds or thousands of followers who believed they were Messiah. And most of them were put to death by the Romans as threats to Caesar and the authority of Caesar, as was Jesus. So it was an age where they were talking about the end of the world. They were talking about the coming of the Messiah. They were talking about God intervening directly in human history. There have been different Jewish ages where that was true. That was a prominent one. And so the gift of prophecy, of knowing all the secret mysteries of God. There were a lot of mystery schools back then in Greece and Rome. Also a lot of mystery teachings in Kabbalah, kind of secret, hidden Jewish mysticism. Even if you knew all that, which was highly sought after by many and kind of it'd be really cool if I knew all this stuff. Paul's saying if you know all that stuff, and if you have faith that can move mountains, which is one of Jesus's examples, still you're nothing. That doesn't mean anything. What means something is love. If you live a life of love, if you have love for one another, that's what matters. None of the rest of this stuff. So I think that's a good reminder to us when we do get caught up in possessions or we get caught up in our egos or our reputation or just even our comfort. Nothing's wrong with comfort. Personally, I'm very fond of it, but we can get so caught up in our comfort sometimes that we won't extend ourselves to someone in need. We won't consider something that is a little troubling and doesn't quite fit with our belief system. We won't even consider it. Somebody in the spiritual or political arena that we don't like, we've already decided how we feel about them, and so nothing that comes out of their mouth could even be possibly remotely in any way good, so we're not going to listen to it. We have a lot of places where we close down and won't stay open to that movement of love in us. So, and some of these tough, and there are some genuinely tough issues in life to figure out. You know, where do we stand on some of these things? And they've always been tough issues for people right along. So spiritual teachers in general have a lot of commonality in what they've come to understand, and some of them vary from one another. So, you know, if you believe in reincarnation and that's really important to you, try to find it in the Bible, and you can definitely find hints of it there, but you can't find it clearly taught anywhere. If you are really opposed to the idea of reincarnation and you believe there's one life, one heaven, and one hell forever afterwards, and you really want to find that in the Bible, you can find a couple of hints like that in the Bible, but you cannot find that actively being taught that way in the Bible either. That's also not there. So, you know, there's one of the things that I like to think about, and we'll wrap up with this and go into the meditation, but my experience growing up in traditional Christian churches was not a horrible one, was not negative, and was limited. And many of the churches I had been involved in over the years believed that their understanding of what the Bible said was right. And if you didn't believe that, or any other church or any other organization that didn't believe that, was wrong. Just not even a different understanding, but just wrong, flat out wrong. One of the things that's interesting about Judaism is that the entire Torah, for that matter, the prophets as well, but the entire, I'll say, Jewish Bible was written in Hebrew. And the Hebrew originally was written with no vowels. It was just a string of consonants. So for example, if you had in English the letter R and D next to each other, but no vowel, and you're reading that, is that word red? You put an E vowel in between the R and D, is it red? Do you put an I vowel in there? Is it rid? Do you put an I between the R and D and an E afterwards? Is it ride? So as you can, and there's many others, but just using that example, you can see, is it saying rid, ride, red? You know, what, rod? What is it saying? Because without the vowels, it's meaningless. And one of the teachings in Jewish mysticism is that it is meaningless until we read it. And when we read it, we have to put the breath, which is vowels. The vowel sounds are breath sounds. They're breath sounds. They're not t, k. They're breath sounds. When you put the breath into it by reading it, you breathe life into it, and you have to interpret what does it mean. And there can be multiple valid interpretations that differ from one another. So it's a different way of looking at the teaching than fundamentalist Christianity, for example. So much more open to questioning, much more open to different interpretations, which suits me way better. So I thought that was kind of an interesting thing. Also, I'm rambling on here, but also just so you know, they found a very, 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 very old scroll of Isaiah, 1,000 years older than anything we'd had of the book of Isaiah up to that point. They compared that Hebrew to a modern Jewish Torah scroll of the book of Isaiah, or not a Torah scroll, but a Jewish Bible with the book of Isaiah in Hebrew, and they compared it. The ancient one of the book of Isaiah on a parchment scroll and the modern Jewish Bible book of Isaiah, they had 7 differences in the entire book. Many of them just spelling, but 7 differences. They then found the oldest to date copy of the complete New Testament that we have to date, historically, and they compared that to the modern New International Version, which is the most popular of the 27 books of the New Testament. They compared those, and there were over 7,000 differences. So the New Testament we have now is not anywhere close to what it was when it started, but the Jewish Bible is pretty consistent. So that's kind of another interesting little bit. So, important? No. Interesting? Maybe. So what is interesting is love is at the center of our being, and when we put it at the center of our lives work better. When we fail to put it at the center of our lives, or fail to recognize it is at the center of our lives, we suffer more than is necessary. So let's just pause for a moment with all these ideas and close our eyes and open our souls and begin to focus on where that love moves in us. Where can you feel it right now in you? In your heart, diffused throughout your body, focused in your mind, dwelling deep in your soul somewhere, or just all around you. Just wherever you may be able to sense or feel that presence of love. Pay attention to it. Begin to open to it more fully and more deeply. And let that spirit of love, that presence of love, that light of love, let it begin to just, if it already doesn't have a place that's deeply anchored in you, allow it to find a place in you where it can take a deep-seated anchor in you so that you don't lose hold of it, don't lose awareness of it. So the reality of that love is accessible. And as we begin to move into silence for a few moments together, whether you're just remembering people you love or animals you love or times you've been loved in your life, if you're only doing that, that's just fine. If you're contemplating what is the nature of love, that's fine. Perhaps best of all is to just open yourself and invite love to reveal its reality to you in a way that you can directly experience. So that what this love is that all the great teachers through the ages have spoken of, you can be touched by that. You can come to know that in you. And you can welcome and nurture that presence in you. So in these few minutes of silence, let's give ourselves to that love and do our best to be attentive to it. So we just start bringing our attention back. Alrighty, so a couple of quick announcements to end with. Wish all of you a happy Thanksgiving week holiday. Hope it goes well. You get to enjoy it with someone you care about, or enjoy time alone if that's what you're choosing to do. Speaking of which, next Friday, the Friday after Thanksgiving, the 29th, we will not be having an inner hour because we have family Thanksgiving plans. So next Friday, no inner hour. Then we start up again as usual the Friday after next, which is December 6th, I believe. But in any case, will be the first Friday in December. So no inner hour next week. The first Friday night in December will be another one of our interactive ones. So we'll be having a topic or a theme for discussion again, open it up to the group. I hear from some of you that you like those. I really enjoy them, so I hope most of you do. But we'll be having another one that first Friday in December, as opposed to this format where I just present and talk and you listen. So that will be a group interactive discussion on the first Friday in December. Ani, is there anything else you can think of that I'm spacing out that we need to announce? I think not. Okay, so anyway, thank you all. It's a blessing to have you with us tonight, and I hope that you have a wonderful week, and I hope that you do experience an even deeper love this week, and that you progressively find what you're looking for and recognize it when you do. So thank you all very much. I'm going to stop the recording here in a moment and close out the meeting for tonight. Look forward to seeing you, hopefully locally somewhere in between, but here again on December 6th. Bye for now.